Back everybody to the afternoon second session of the HARC conference. This is our second annual conference, and we have just completed a very useful AGM where we welcomed on board 4 more countries: Italy, Uruguay, Spain and Romania. Our country delegates are all reporting growing interest in HARC, and we predicted this can only, as predicted, we see this is having a very positive effect on all racing. We have a very interesting afternoon ahead, so I will not take up too much of your time. Just to say that the full information on HARC is on our website, and that anybody who is here can ask one of the board, or particularly Lee Young, for any further details about HARC and the information that they require. And we are very active at the moment, hoping that we will be introducing HARC races in UAE next year. We have potentially some sponsors who are interested in supporting this, so we would encourage all trainers to start looking for HARC courses. I think there are quite a lot to be found in the Emirates, especially coming perhaps from the endurance world. So without more ado, I would like to introduce Anna Stojanowska from Poland, who's going to give us a talk on particularly importance of dam lines, and it's particularly relevant to us this weekend because this is the dam line of Monarch AH, who is His Highness Sheikh Sultan's senior stallion, and he comes from the most outstanding, one of the most outstanding dam lines of the world. Anna, welcome, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I would like to thank very much to His Highness as well as to HARC to giving me this opportunity and to talk to you. This is a big honor for me and, of course, a big stress, but I try to do my best. Well, the story will be about dam line. I hope that I can connect all women because it's a story only about females. And before I prefer this presentation, I was thinking about the title, and it reminded me, I don't know if you remember, an American movie, Steel Magnolias, about the excellent woman. And this story is about excellent mares, incredible mares, which create a dynasty of race horses. So let's begin.
Who's your blanket?
This one. This one.
No, next. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the story began at the early 30s. In 1933, the family of Paulina and Stanisław Żarczewscy decided to establish a new start. And as the beginners, they bought 2 half-sisters, 2 mares, Margucha, a great racer, Oaks winner, and Safta, also a great racehorse. As you can see, she raced 3 seasons, 23 times, won a lot of races. Both these mares came to this private stud of Whitna, and both of them spent a lot of years producing great horses. But Safta became a better broodmare than her half-sister. She was bred in 1939 to stallion Miecznik, and she gave a daughter. The daughter was named Sabta,
And Sabda became a foundation mare of one of the most famous families, racing families in Poland. After the Second World War, the minister decided to move the horses from the private stud, which left, to Nowy Dwór stud, the state stud. And this is how this story actually began, because Sabda built this line, this dynasty at Nowy Dwór, later on at Janów Podlaski. Sabda gave 7 foals, including 3 excellent mares, Salva, Sakwa, and Sabelina. The first 2 was good, but not good enough. This is Sabda herself and her daughter Sabelina. Sabelina became kind of phenomenon on the world scale. She gave finally 8 generations of very important stakes races, Derby and Oaks winners. And what is for me even most important and most incredible, she never, or her daughters and granddaughters, she never lose the Arabian type. Finally, Sabelina, when she finished her racing and breeding career at the start at Janów Podlaski, she was sold to US in 1969. But before she left, she left her daughter, Santa. We will be back to Santa soon. Santa was born in 1964. She was by Chort. And she was also Oaks and Derby winner. This is how Santa looked. Besides Santa, Sabelina left another fantastic offspring, Sabat by Chort, Sambor. As you see, whatever we say about his racing abilities, he was also an Arabian stallion. And we are back to Janów Podlaski, Santa, a daughter of Sabelina, who turned out to be a perfect broodmare, a perfect mother. He left several great babies, daughters and sons, including Santos, Derby winner, Sasanka, incredible mare, unbeaten on the racetrack, a winner of 10 stakes, including Derby, Oaks, and Criterium, and a formal continuator of Sabelina line. Sasanka herself, also very successful show horse. Very typey, very beautiful. And some of her daughters, Sarenka, Saszetka, Sanna. As you can see, many of Polish horses left to US. Sasanka was sold to US in 1981 to Mr. Armand Hammer. And she gave him 2 fillies, but the most important thing, she gave Monarch, our hero. This is why we are here, to celebrate his 30th birthday. He was born in 1987, and he is the son of Viking. I believe that it will be a recent story about Monarch, so I don't need to talk about him. And we will see him tomorrow, yes? It seems that he had a happy life in the US, enjoying some pastures and freedom.
Still having a wonderful life.
I still have a wonderful life. And we are back to Janov because, as I said, I want to talk about the dam line. Sasanka left, as I said, several daughters, including Sashetka, who became a really amazing broodmare, giving during her 23 years of life and a breeding career fantastic foals. As Sasha, twice British national champion mare, means not only brave but also not only full of stamina but also typey, beautiful, with excellent Arabian type. Saba, who gave us a Polish national reserve champion stallion and top 10 in Paris Salar. And Savantka, a dam of Sephora. And if you can see watch these old pictures, this not so long way from Sabelina and Santa herself, which doesn't look today as a modern Arabian type. It's not so far from those horses to Sephora, which became Polish national junior champion and Paris and European Championship top 5 mare. And those horses, well, as I said, the way from Santa to Sephora is not so long, but we still have this beauty in our hands. And of course, a priceless Sarmatia. We will be back to this mare. Sarmatia, daughter of Gil, a Derby and Oaks winner, another generation of Derby winners who raced for 2 seasons and who won 10 races, who raced 10 times and who won 8 races. And who was also successfully shown in Polish national championships some years ago. And if I remember, she got 3rd place in the class, which is not that bad. Saba, Salar, Savantka, and Sephora during European Championships. No, this is at Janov Podlaski, actually, as a yearling. She was sold last year to Qatar. Sarmatia, a great mare and a very successful racehorse, and as well as a very good show horse. As I said, she became 3rd, I think, during our national championships. Sarmatia left at Janov a daughter, Salsa, and 3 granddaughters. Severina, which is, I believe, still at Janov Podlaski, born in 2014. Sadeba, should be 2-year-old now. Out of Salsa, means it's a granddaughter of Sarmatia. And of course, Sephora's daughter, born 2015, which means granddaughter of Sarmatia. And I believe she's still at Janov Podlaski. So as you see, both combination to the races and to beauty works with this family. Whatever we think, we say sometimes that these mares, even with bred with donkey, they can give something spectacular. And they did it, really. Salsa, which I believe Marek is still at Janov. Well, I believe that Sarmazia's offspring turned out to be real diamonds, and what she gave is amazing. And as I said to Deidre a few minutes ago, we are here to celebrate 30th birthday of Monarch himself. But also we have his daughter, which is still alive and who is in Saudi right now, Savannah, who is getting 20 years this year. She's born 1997. So we have another opportunity to celebrate this family. And I have a very last picture of her made by Jerzy Bielobok 2 weeks ago. This is Savannah at the 20 years of age with her newborn foal at her side. I don't know if it's a filly or colt. Jurek, do you remember?
This is a filly, but I don't know by name. No, this no.
Oh, it should be one more. Why I'm back to the beginning. I have one more picture to show you, a daughter of Savannah by Twig. And again, whatever we say, she is an Arabian mare. A typical racing combination. I have to find it. This machine hates me. Yes, she is. Help me. First, he lost half of my presentation. Now, he moved to the end. I hate this guy. Believe me, at the end, there is a picture of the daughter of. Yes, she is. So, as I said, incredible potential of this line, and this mare, a typical racing combination, and for sure she raced several times, but she still looks like a Arabian horse. Whatever we said, it's an Arabian mare.
Where is this mare?
At Al Khaladia start in Saudi Arabia, both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Savannah was sold to Emirates in 2004,
Yeah.
but then she moved to Saudi and she's still at Al Khaladia. So, what to say more? Beauty and stamina in one, and I hope there is still some generations in Poland to be bred at Janów Podlaski. Yes, thank you very much. That's, yeah.
Thank you very much, Anna. I don't know if anybody would like to ask Anna. She has a huge wealth of knowledge, which we should take advantage of while she's here, about the importance of dam lines, not just our very precious dam line. Perhaps somebody has some questions that they would like to ask. Yes, Sam.
Thank you. Pamela Burton, USA. Thank you for your great history.
I have only 2 days to
Yes.
prepare it, so this is why it's so short.
Well, my question is actually fairly basic, but can you explain the system of naming? You have all S's there. What does it mean?
It's always the names in the state stock begins from the first letter of mother's name.
And it always follows in the
It
alphabet.
always follows the first, yes.
Thank you.
This is why.
That was before, it was different. But so the confusion came because if you follow the name from the before Second World War, it starts with A, and every year they were naming with the next letter.
Before the war.
And in 1938 was W, and 1939 was Z. So it's mystic because with the war we just finished an alphabet.
Okay.
And they start again from A, and unfortunately they changed the system on E, which is very rare letter in Polish language, and that's why you have very many
This is why we have
weird names
sometimes
in Poland on E, and because the emails came very. If I'm
sometimes it's very
having a
difficult to
microphone,
find. Yes.
I want to say that the last derby winner from this dam line was Sabir. It was 2000. It was born 2007, so it was 2011.
Yes, but I promised
Out of
to
salsa.
talk only about women.
Yeah. A man has to think about men. Sorry.
About Sarmata,
Yes.
that unfortunately died last year in Brazil
Oh wow.
and was the leading for the stallion for endurance for more than 10 years.
Amazing.
Following years, for 10 years, he is the first one, the stallion, for more than 10 years.
Any more questions from anybody? Okay, well, thank you very much, Anna. I will now just have 5 minutes while I've just set up my own presentation. I've called this a very short gallop through the history of Arabian racing, and it is with particular emphasis on racing in the Arab world. It's anybody that was at the WAHO conference a couple of weeks ago, it is largely the same talk, but actually expanded somewhat. As you can see, this is an old photo, and the importance of the horse and racing has been a vital part of Arab culture, and its importance cannot be underestimated. And it can be traced from pre-Islamic times through many poems and writings to the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. For example, here are the lines from a pre-Islamic poem celebrating the fighting prowess of the Nashal tribe racing into battle. Basama, son of Hazan al-Nashal, was translated by Charles James Lyell, and it says, "When a goal of glory is set, and the runners rush forth thereto, of us shalt thou find in the race the foremost and the next, the first and the second." You can also find from the poet Al-Mutanabi, who was one of the most famous Abbasid poets of the 10th century, and one of his poems, "Riding a noble mare, whose back none else may climb, whose hind and forelegs seem in galloping as one, nor hand nor foot requireth she to urge her on." Racing was a favorite pastime of the ancient Arabs. The horses were sometimes run, as in Rome, at the Corso without riders. The usual number was 10, though matches with smaller numbers were sometimes set up, as in the infamous match of Duhis and Al-Gabra, which gave rise to the bitter 40-year war between the Abs and the Dabian tribes. Racing did not stop with the coming of Islam, but was encouraged by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who organized races himself, and particularly approved racing and competition for camels, horses, and javelin throwers. Such sports were considered indispensable for keeping men and animals fit. Keeping animals fit for the wars waged in support of the spread of the new religion, and substantial references can be found in the Holy Quran and the Hadiths. Not only was the horse a vital tool in the battle, but it was a source of wealth, status, and security. Naturally, this led the Arab people to invest much time in understanding the horse and how to raise and look after him. The depths of this interest and the sophistication of the times can be found in many books and texts, such as The Merits of the Horse in Islam by Imam al-Hafiz ibn al-Dumyati, an Egyptian active around 1285 AD, or sketches on courses of the highest breeding by Sheikh Muhammad al-Bakshi al-Halabi from Aleppo, who died in 1678. Both authors go to great length with their references as the sayings of the Prophet. In particular, something's happened to my... Something's funny going on. Excuse us a minute. Sorry about this, I've not had these problems with my computer before. Get there. It does take a long time because it's too full, just to
ده شغال لايف؟ حتى اجيب منديل طيب؟ اجيلك؟ ايه؟ اجيلك؟ هو مش عارف لما وصلنا للجاكيت دوت هو اللي عمل مشكله فيها الدكتور اللي عمل مشكله لانه وقع قفل وفتح
انقل على اليو اس بي واشتغل على جهازنا اسرع. محمد يو اس بي واشتغل على جهازك اسرع.
Well, that's okay. Yes, yes. I want to get into slide. It's okay. Yep. Touch this. Right, let's get going again. I beg your pardon. You stay. These are all pictures that were taken actually in Palestine in the 1940s, as you can see, but they also illustrate, I think, the way racing probably was for many hundreds of years, and with just changes in the way people dressed and so on. It was still very much part of the tradition. So not only was the horse a vital tool in battle, but it was also a source of wealth, status and security. And naturally this led the Arab people to invest much time in understanding the horse and how to raise and look after him. The depths of this interest and the sophistication of the times can be found in many ancient books, such as Merits of the Horse in Islam, or sketches on courses of the highest breeding by Sheikh Mohammed al-Bakshi al-Halabi from Aleppo, who died in 1678. Both authors go to great lengths to authenticate their references as the sayings of the Prophet, and in particular, Dumyati dealt with the legitimacy of organizing racing and whether laying wagers is permissible in Islam. These are just odd slides, they're not of any particular reference at that time. Dumyati's work also states races of two distances were recorded. The first for lean or fit horses were between Al-Hafiya and Thaniya al-Wadha, two known places, a distance of between 5 and 6 mil apart, which is roughly 1 mil is apparently about 1 kilometer. Whilst for the fatter and less fit, a distance of 1 mil between Athania to the mosque at Bani Zurqa was considered suitable. A particular condition of the races was that horses should be competitive one with another, that is, of equal standard. If one or two were known to be superior or more qualified to win the race than the opposition, i.e. much faster, then their participation would be considered as gambling and therefore forbidden. The unequal horses should be removed from the race. The racing of unequal horses made a race meaningless. The same applied to fitness and purity of pedigree. Like should race with like, or it was considered a wager which is prohibited. He who puts a horse into a race guaranteeing it will win is considered a gambler, and this is not permitted. Different types of horse, all in those days, and you can see what the racing was like then. It is recorded that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, advised on a special training program with racing exercise every day, a special diet with controlled feeding and watering, and that a horse should be blanketed and sweated to harden the skin. It was noted how, in those days, how the colour of the horse deepened as the horse got fitter, something we recognise in the fit horse to this day when we talk about it blooming with health. He also preferred horses with a full set of teeth, i.e. at least 5 years old. Another important issue was the determining the winner of the race, and two solutions were approved. The first was according to the ears, which ears crossed the line first. But this was only provided the necks were the same length. I don't quite know how they managed that little one, but it's an interesting idea. The second was according to which horse's withers crossed the line first. Two other important conditions coming from the hadiths were: a horse should not be provoked or incited by its owners while on the racing field with the aim of making it run faster, or no spare horse should be used on the track. That is, the horseman must not use more than one horse at a time should his horse tire or fall ill. So one rather wonders what was going on in some of these races, but we know about this in the endurance world, I believe. Prizes were also of great importance. Ibn Banin in his book confirms that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, arranged a race between horses brought to him from Yemen, and the winner was given 3 garments, the second 2, the third 1, the fourth a dinar, the fifth a dirham, and the 6th a cane. But he blessed all the horses from the first to the last. It is interesting to note that even in modern times, accoutrements were considered of great value. A horse was given to the late Sheikh Zayed, president here, the Sheikh Zayed the Great, by the Saudis, and it is recorded it came complete with special trappings. The placings were also given special names. The winner was Sabiq or Mujali, the horse that pleases its owner. The second was Musali. The third was Musaili. The fourth Tali. Fifth Mu'amal. 6th Murta, 7th Al-Atif, 8th Al-Hadi, 9th Al-Latim, and 10th Al-Sukait. And perhaps one of the Arabs amongst us, if there's anybody here, could give you some translations of what those mean at a later date. But they all have meanings of where the horse finished in the race. And these are just some other pictures of racing in Palestine in the 40s. A recent discovery of a monument in Turkey was made to a Roman jockey in Anatolia, Turkey, with a horse relief and a tablet with racing rules, which suggests racing was already well regulated 2,000 years ago in the Central Asian region, not far from the cradle of the Arabian horse, the Fertile Crescent. Of great interest is that the tablet expresses similar ideals. Professor Hassan Bahar from Konyasel University quotes from the tablet. You can't really read it, but obviously he could. A horse cannot compete in another race if it finishes first in any given race. An owner cannot have another horse compete in one race if he owns a previous winner. Bahar goes on to say, this is a sign of gentlemanly conduct in the races. It offers a chance for others to win as well, unlike in modern races. As we know, racing has remained popular in Turkey and the Middle East and North Africa throughout the centuries down to the present day. Tunisia, Morocco, Iran, Bahrain all have healthy racing industries with many tales to tell, and most importantly for some, programs which protect their local bloodlines and genetic pools, which we hope will be carried on into the future. Bahrain has a great history of breeding and racing. The royal stud dates from the late 18th century, and its horses grace some of the earliest stud books. The knowledge, soundness and usability of their precious local lines is considerably enhanced because they were tested through racing. It is no surprise that Kochel and Afas went to Poland in 1931 and appears in successful Polish racing pedigrees. Testing the athletic ability is such an important part of Arab horse tradition, it must never be lost. Meanwhile, in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, now host probably the best racing in the world, with large populations of imported horses. Such is its popularity in UAE that 45 or more horses can be entered in a race, with only 50 as a safety factor. Yet 25 years ago, when I first arrived, racing was still something only for high days and holidays. The recent explosion of interest and enthusiasm for the sport cannot be underestimated, and the people still consider it very much part of their Muslim cultural heritage. Returning to the past, racing was also an important sport in imperial India, especially with the British colonialists. The first government stud was set up under colonial rule in 1795, based around 25 Arab stallions and 500 assorted types of mares. They aimed to produce horses for military purposes and, as an aside, for racing, which was a natural pastime for the East India Company and the various regiments stationed there. They have a long and well-recorded history. Officers' horses of many types, and especially Arabs, performed military duty one day and raced the next. And from the earliest times, Arab-type horses travelled to the east to fill the needs of Asia until the First World War. From 800 to over 1,000 horses left the Gulf ports annually for India's racetracks. These were mainly colts obtained by dealers from the Bedouin tribes. Some undoubtedly authentic purebreds, but others maybe less so. An imported untried youngster could be bought for between 30 and 40 pounds, weanlings colts for much less, whilst a good young performer would fetch anything up to 3,000 pounds in the Bombay market, no small sum. Greyleg. This was possibly the best horse running in his day. He was the property of a Dr. John Colin Campbell. He was a winner of 51 of his 80 races in Bombay, Mysore, Bangalore, between 1861 and 1868. He'd been brought from Kuwait or Bussorah in the Gulf in a dealer's stream. He was considered a Kohelan of excellent true Arabian type. He measured 14 hands high. Incidentally, the painter of this portrait, W. Bruti, rode him in all but 7 of his races. Greyleg met and trounced the eclipse of the day, Hermit, a winner of 34 races at all weights and distances. He was owned by a Major M.J. Turnbull and also considered an outstanding individual of the Kohelan type. A third horse mentioned in The Arab Horse by Major General Tweedy is Rex, who was imported from Nejd by Aid bin Tamimi, a horse and camel dealer, who paid £8 for the weanling and brought him to Bombay. He was a mere 13 hands high, yet he was apparently a brilliant winner of many races and eventually ended up in the stud of His Highness the Maharaja of Jodhpur. Various later horses from India's tracks appear from time and again in modern pedigrees, and some of their stories are equally interesting. For example, Dwarka, foaled in 1892, was bred by the Anaza Bedouins. He was imported into India by Major General Ralph Broome, Director of Remounts, for the government of Bombay, who selected him for racing. He won 12 out of 15 races, including the Hurricane Stakes at the Rawalpindi Spring Meeting of 1898, in a time of 1 minute 53 seconds. He was considered the best Arabian of his day, and Broome described him as the most beautiful Arab I've ever seen. He was imported into England in 1901, having been purchased by a Mrs. Atkinson, who hunted him side saddle with 26 different packs throughout the UK. Subsequently, he went to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales stud in Devonshire, where he was used for polo pony breeding. And he remained there until his death in 1921. And his bones can be found in the British Museum. He is the sire of Aldebaran, or known Aldebar in the US, and the grandsire of Algol, and he appears twice in the pedigree of the famous Darji and will appear in many, many of our current racing horses to this day. Another stallion found in modern pedigrees is Mutrub, 1887, a Siglavi Jadran from Nejd, a race winner in India as well as a winner of numerous championships when he was brought back to England. Mutrub was the sire of Shahzada, exported to Australia, after whom the famous endurance race is named. Another exceptional favourite acquired in the Middle East, who made his way back to Europe when his owner returned home, was Volonel, owned by Lord Roberts. It was his famous charger, and he took part in the 300-mile forced march from Kabul to Kandahar. He paraded in Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee procession in London, where he was decorated by special permission. It was not recorded if he raced, but another horse on that fateful march certainly did, and that was Maidan. Maidan, as well as taking part in other campaigns, in between times he won many races, including a 4-mile steeplechase, before eventually returning to England by way of France, where he won a race in Pole. There are many others who served as racehorses and chargers as their owners saw fit, and eventually found their way to Europe, where they continued to race and hunt into old age. 11 out of the 110 horses in registered Volume 1 of the Arab Horse Society stud book fall into that category. Such Arabs were noted for their soundness and the consistency with which they appeared week after week through the racing season. Sir Vidal Sassoon, from one of the richest families of the time in India, raced 2 of his Arabs up to the age of 15, and they remained in the top class handicaps until they retired to stud. And this was not uncommon. Moving west, one of the last of this type of horse to be imported to UK was Crosby, who is in Volume 1 of the Arab Horse Society stud book. He was foaled in Syria in 1908 and purchased in Abbasiyah, Cairo by Lieutenant Colonel Stuart DSO. He was a winner of many races, including the Municipal Cup in Alexandria in 1913. He was brought back to UK after 1914, where he won various awards in the Arab stallion classes, including beating Skowronek at the National Pony Society show of 1920. I include him here for purely personal reasons, to show how mobile our bloodlines can be, because this stallion had only a handful of purebred foals, but to my amazement, was one of his descendants ended up in the UAE via Saudi Arabia, and was to be the cause of my being here today. And also by a hand of fate, owning the painting of him that you see here. Excuse me. We know that Wilfred Blunt and Lady Anne Blunt took interest in such horses, and there are many references to horses for racing and polo in contemporary biographies and literature. It should not be forgotten that when the Blunts first went looking for Arabs, it was very much with the thought of purchasing horses which could re-infuse Arab blood into the thoroughbred. Only later did they recognise the need to collect the best horses they could find to preserve the Arab breed itself. In 1884, Blunt eventually managed to persuade the UK Jockey Club to hold a race for Arab horses. It was over 2 miles and attracted 12 entries, of which 8 ran. They were of all ages and included several horses from India. The winner was the 3-year-old Halfa, whose sire Kars and Dam Hagar were both imported. Second was Rataplan, bred by Ibn Hemsi of the Gamusa tribe. Both Halfa and Rataplan belong to the Blunts and are in modern pedigrees. The Blunts rode many of their perches, such as Hagar, on their Middle Eastern travels, and they also raced some, including the famous Masoud, who was purchased and raced in Cairo. Through his Crabbit descendants, Masoud has been one of the most important influences on modern pedigrees through such important descendants as Daud, Astralid, Faluka, Rizala, to name but a few, and they will appear in virtually every stud book in the world. Further fascinating of these horses, details of these horses can be found in Peter Upton's book, The Arab Horse. An attempt to revive racing in England was made in 1923. The race was run over a mile at Bideford and won by a mare Belka, owned by H.V. Musgrave Clark, from the above-mentioned Shahzada, then owned by Mr. Huff. 2 more races were held in 1928 and 1929, but it was to be 49 years before Arabs were again racing in the UK. In 1978, when the Arab Horse Society decided to organise Arab racing once more. In due course, of course, it split from the parent body and is now run by the Arabian racing organisation Arrow, and continues to develop thanks to generous support from the Middle Eastern countries from around this part of the world. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Arabians had become an important part of the world equestrian scene. European aristocrats, particularly from Central Europe and Russia, were very much involved in horse breeding and improvement. The many wars made huge demands on the supply of horses, and the wealthy sent expeditions to the Middle East to obtain purebreds. I've been doing too much shouting recently. Which used to obtain purebreds, mainly used stallions, which were used to upgrade local breeds. And these were typical of the horses of the times after between the First and the Second World War. Taken from Poland to Russia, Trushika and Tarasha, who is, of course, the dam of Negative, who again appears in so many pedigrees today. Over time, these countries started to build up studs of purebreds as their owners realized their value, and they also realized the need to test the horses in some way for soundness, temperament, and endurance. By the early 20th century, Russia and Poland had developed systems of racing to test the stock they bred. And of course, by the latter part of the 20th century, Tersk stud in Russia and the great state studs of Poland, Janów Podlaski, Michalov, and Bialka, were producing many outstanding horses. The testing of their horses on the racetrack is an integral part of the breed selection, and remains so to this day. It comes as no surprise that behind many major modern winners in Arabian shows, racing, and endurance descend from these roots. The United States in particular has benefited from these horses. Formal Arabian racing started in 1959 with exhibition races held at major racetracks. The first was won by a predominantly Polish horse called Ophir, who had two lines to the Polish Ophir seen here. Incidentally, his dam belonged at that time, for a period, to the late president of WAHO, J. Stream. One only has to think of the mighty stallions Sambor, Orzel, Viking, and his son Monarch to understand the influence this blood has had on the USA, especially when combined with daughters of Kontiki, largely Crabbit, and other outcross lines. In addition, some excellent Egyptian horses have raced in USA, such as Ziti Alibaba, Azja Ibn Fala, and so on. In the 1990s, well over 1,000 horses were in training across the country in the US, and many outstanding horses have since been bred, which have spread around the world with descendants sweeping the boards. These days, the automobile is so much part of our way of life, we tend to forget that at the end of the 19th and well into the 20th century, horses and horsepower were vital to the economy of a country, and it was necessary to have a constant access to large, healthy horse breeding populations to meet the demands of work, war, and pleasure. The Greater Middle East was one such source. However, the First World War, disease, and the coming of the car had a devastating effect on horse numbers. And whilst the region had served as a very important market for horses for local cavalry, as mechanization took over, the demand for horses fell away drastically, except for racing. A further problem for the Arabian was the colonial powers of Britain and France had brought and left behind their own horses. And these are similar, the sort of horse that was left behind, which were generally bigger and faster than the local horses, and when used for breeding unscrupulously, they put at risk the purity of the Arab horse. This was especially true for the horses bound for the racetracks of Baghdad, Beirut, and Cairo, not to mention the Indian subcontinent. In those early days, purchasers depended on tribal traditions, local knowledge, and the honesty or not of dealers. And all historical accounts seem to say it was very much a case of buyer beware. By the 1930s, it became obvious that the danger was not only the purity, as Dr. Ahmed Mabrouk, chief of the animal breeding section of the Royal Agricultural Society of Egypt, was to remark, but the possible extinction of the Arab horse in its homeland, and steps were taken in a few countries to preserve and record the precious remaining horses, in line with Western stud books. By 1936, Dr. Mabrouk had made an almost fruitless search throughout the Middle East, looking for Arabians to purchase for the RAS. At the time he wrote, "To my surprise, no stud books were available. Consequently, it was not possible to select animals with any degree of certainty that they were thoroughbred or pure. It was only thanks to the World Arabian Horse Organization, formed in 1970, that we have an agreed common definition of the Arab horse and all the approved stud books and records of today. Egypt was one of the original signatories to the formation of the WAHO, followed by Jordan, while most of the the Middle Eastern countries only joined and produced stud books in the last 25 years. Nevertheless, we do Nevertheless, we do not know the true historical extent of the purity of the Arab horse, and maybe full knowledge would destroy the romance and mythology that surrounds it, and just maybe the selection methods of the past based on the visual evidence and performance, as well as known pedigree details, gave us satisfactory results as the blood typing and DNA we now use. In Iraq, such was the concern of Major Chadwick, who was the Inspector General of the Veterinary Department of Iraq after World War I, that he advised the Iraqi cabinet to set up the government Arabian horse stud book to register and prove Arabian horses. He understood the value put on certain pure bloodlines by the people and recognized a stud book would help those breeders and protect their horses. He considered the breed endangered by unscrupulous breeders with an eye for the fast buck. And in an article in the first journal of the Arab Horse Society, published in 1935 and written after he'd spent 16 years working in Iraq, he states, "It is hoped that the establishment of the proposed Iraqi government stud book will restore the confidence of the foreign nations interested in the Arab horse and safeguard its future." In the article, Major Chadwick also describes how horses were approved for inclusion in the stud book. A small selection committee of 4 has been formed, consisting of 2 well-known Arab gentlemen of high standing and reputation, a senior British veterinary officer and a steward of the Iraq Turf Club. No animal will be registered unless passed by the committee. He then proceeds to describe the inspection process and what the committee was looking for. Every animal must have the conformation of a typical Arab horse, making due allowance for variations that come within the limitations permitted by any breed, and its origin proved beyond doubt. There are certain characters, however, which denote the presence of foreign blood, such as the arched face or Roman nose as compared with the broad and slightly prominent forehead and undulating face of the typical Arabian. The Arab has a flag-like tail, and when in motion, and only Arabs carry their tails to one side. The action and the ability to move in small circles whilst running at comparatively fast paces is a characteristic of the Arab, which is an interesting one that we can all consider. Similarly, in Egypt, at the end of the 19th century, there was a general shortage of horses, and horsepower was essential for everyday life. Very few purebreds remained, and they were in the hands of even fewer breeders. In an attempt to improve matters and to increase the stock, the RAS, over a 6-year period from 1908, experimented using thoroughbred stallions on small local mares. However, the results were so disappointing it was decided to return to purebred Arab stallions. These, along with some mares, were obtained from the studs of Abbas Pasha II, Lady Anne Blunt and Prince Muhammad Ali. The results were much more successful, and the legacy of the RHS which was to become the EAO, is there for all to see, as the EAO was to become one of the most important sources of purebred Arabians in the 20th century. Don't forget, Nazir was one of the most influential sires of modern times, raced successfully, and his descendants are still a source for speed. And here we have Aswan, who had such an effect on race breeding in Russia. There can be no doubt that these countries, while racing provided temptation to cheat, it also helped preserve the Arabian when its use as a warhorse was over. In the post-war days, Arabian racing was still very popular and an important activity in Egypt. Races were organised by the Jockey Club under the presidency of His Highness Prince Omar Tusen, who was determined that every care should be taken to ensure the purity of the horses raced. Egypt's history was similar to that of Iraq, and as we have seen, foreign blood had been openly introduced into the country's horse population, so steps had to be taken to ensure it was kept away from the racetracks. Prince Omar Tusen formed a classification committee of experienced experts to provide an Arab certificate. Not only did this committee pay attention to the type of the horse it inspected, but the certificate had to be confirmed at various stages of a horse's race career whilst taking into consideration the number of wins it might have. If there was any justifiable belief that a particular horse's birth certificate was obtained under false pretenses or by error of judgment, the permanent certificate was refused and the horse's racing and stud career was finished. The criteria were modified over the years, but they were still in existence when Mrs. Judith Forbes made her first visits to Egypt in the late 50s and early 60s. She spent time at some of the assessments, and she writes at length about the classifications in her book, The Classic Arab Horse. It's interesting to note how recently it was still considered essential that such protective measures must be pursued. It's also interesting to note that in all those early assessments for purity, tail carriage was mentioned as one of the most important distinguishing characteristics of the Arab horse, along with height. It was a vital feature in the Egyptian classification. And as Mrs. Forbes says in The Classic Arabian Horse, some humorous incidents break the monotony. And it's refreshing to note that Americans and Europeans are not the only ones who ginger the tails on occasion with an effort to make their horses show proper high tail carriage. The committee members are not fooled by this ruse, however, and horses are treated as disqualified. Arabians in Egypt are still assessed and raced according to height, a not unreasonable concept in our very variable breed. The typical high flag-like tail carriage can be seen in the earliest paintings, drawings and sculptures of the Arabian, and it's mentioned in poetry and early writings. An old Arab belief relates that when a horse is galloping fast, the lad riding should be hidden by the neck from the front and the tail should hide him if seen from behind. A quick glance at most current racing photographs shows this is a feature noticeably absent in many of the modern racing Arabians, and it is the lack of such features of classic type which remain a major cause for people to rightly or wrongly question the purity of such horses. France is another country with long and serious history of racing Arabians. However, as in other European countries in the 19th century, this was done not for the benefit of the Arab breed so much as to produce better horses for military purposes. The French favoured Anglo-Arabs for their cavalry and produced an excellent horse for sport and racing. This was an early horse, as you can see, Mare, who went from France, who went to Russia, and has been extremely influential in one of their most important dam lines. Nevertheless, 25 years ago, in the words of the much respected Director General of Studs and author of Le Cheval Arabe, Monsieur Philippe Barbie de Préaudeau, said French breeders had a preference for a specific morphology, which even became detrimental to the type of the breed. There lies a problem which is known to all today and it has to be solved. He continues, racing with Arabians is now a high-intensity spectator sport and a criterion of value. These races require both moral, physical qualities. The moral qualities are willpower, courage, a taste to fight, obstinacy. The physical qualities are strength, resistance, excellent respiratory and muscular systems, a good capacity to recuperate. He also says, of course, the horse must look like an Arabian and stay within the standards of the breed. Mankind, by selective breeding, can completely change the appearance of an animal in a few generations, as happened with the look of the modern show horse or the speed of the modern racehorse. If we care about preserving not only the genetic breadth of the breed, but also the whole unique identity of the classic Arab horse, as has been described by people as far apart as Prince Muhammad Ali and Mr. Barbie de Préaudeau, and in many other experts over the centuries, the racing of all our horses should be encouraged, not just for speed or winning, but for the joy of seeing beauty that can perform. If care is not taken, we will be left only with the pieces of paper. The original classic horse will have been lost or transformed into something completely different. And one last horse. This is another outstanding mare bred in France who ended up in Russia and appears in many racing pedigrees to this day. And I think that we cannot, we have to keep the type, but we have to accept that we look for slightly different things in a horse that we want to see racing than we want that we will see in the beauty shows. But we have to be careful not to lose the type when we're breeding, and we have to be sure to keep all of our bloodlines as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Very good. So we now move on. I don't know what's happened to... there she is. Evie. Are you ready? We're ready for you, yes.
I would like your information afterwards. Of course. And Fabio. Are you on a USB stick? Yes.
Well, I can start talking if they want to hook my computer up. Okay. Okay.
Okay, well, I know we're all getting our jet lag 4 o'clock in, so I won't be long. I'm getting my jet lag setting in, so I won't be long. I'll just start talking and get right into it while they're fixing my computer.
Can you look into my laptop? Okay, so my name is Evie Tubbs-Sweeney. I'm the USA rep for HARC. I'm super happy to be here. I was sorry to miss last year. I had a baby last year, so I couldn't leave him last year. They pulled me away this year. He's a year and a half. He's great. And with Dad. They asked me to talk a little bit about, thank you, that was good and quick. Okay. They asked me to talk about a little bit about what we're doing in the U.S. We have used HARC as a way to do a bunch of things at one time. Our numbers in Arabian racing in the U.S. have been on decline for the last few years, and we see HARC as perhaps the answer to a lot of different questions. We came in late in 2015, so last year was really our first year, and we also used it as an opportunity to do a lot of outreach to what we think is our lowest hanging fruit for bringing in new owners, new horses bred, and new horses to the track through HARC. And we have a pretty active horse show scene. And let me segue into that. Who am I? I'm a little bit new to the racing world. My background is in the show horse world. I own a marketing agency that represents the branding campaigns and ongoing promotional campaigns for several different nonprofit organizations, including the Arabian Jockey Club, several different breeding programs, and stallions at stud, primarily in the United States. I came into racing actually through the thoroughbred world, not through the Arabian world, interestingly, on a little hiatus from the horse business, funny, and met some of my Arabian racing cohorts at the Breeders' Cup Championships in 2015, I believe, and was hooked. And it just became a natural segue, and since then it's been the supreme passion for my husband and I. So I feel super privileged to be here, even though my background is more in the horse show world. So that's how I got into racing, and I started doing some work for the Arabian Jockey Club prior to HARC, and we had wanted to do some sort of an outreach campaign for a long time, but didn't have the funding for it, didn't have the way to do it. And when HARC came into the picture, we thought, this is it, because there's a lot of potential in the show horse world with a lot of the old athletic lines, like what Deirdre was talking about and Anna was talking about. There's a lot of untapped potential there, we believe, not only in the United States, but around the world. State of the Union on USA racing. We need. This is not much different than a lot of other countries here in this room. We need more horses running. We need more new owners. We need more new breeders, and we need more diversified bloodlines. So, the show world versus the racing world. Like I said before, we think that the show horse market in the U.S. is low-hanging fruit. The number of horses bred in the U.S., show horses, was 3,300, and approximately 3,000 were shown. And this is all three levels of recognized competition, so Class A, regional, and national levels. Last year in the Breeders' Sweepstakes program, which is the show horse payback program, we paid out approximately $1 million to the 3,000 horses. And also last year we paid out almost double that to just 171 racehorses. So that's kind of our introductory statement to the show horse world. And they do the math quickly, and that gets their attention quickly. So why is HARC perfect for reaching the show horse markets? And I want you to to process and filter this through possibly your country and your organization too, as you're thinking about HARC in your situation. First of all, show horse breeders breed HARC horses, though they are innately HARC because they're not obviously of the racing line. So this is something that if their horses are athletically talented and bred enough, they very well could do well on the track and earn the HARC money. Show horse breeders appreciate HARC's stand on breed type for the Arabian horse, no matter what the discipline. I hear a lot in the show horse world the dismay about how Arabian racehorses don't look like Arabian horses. And that really bothers them because that's a big part of why they're doing what they're doing. So to have a racing organization that is coming out and taking a stand that Arabian horses should always possess Arabian type reaches them where they're at and makes a difference. It makes them say, okay, I'm listening. Show horse breeders are already actively breeding. Just look at our stats. 3,000 were bred last year for show horses, and that's we're at a fraction of, or a small percentage of that for race horses. So there is a way to tap into that and get immediate results. Show horse breeders are already committed to the Arabian horse. And many show horse breeders are discouraged with the show rein. They're, the subjectivity and the politics of the show ring can be very discouraging, especially with the money that they're putting out into the effort. So a lack of subjectivity with the racetrack is appealing to a lot of them. And lastly, show horse breeders, they can afford to play. They're already playing at pretty high levels, and they can afford to jump right in. So because of all those reasons, we think that that's a really good market for seeing if we can change or alter our statistics currently. So one of the big things we did last year was go on the road with HARC, and we kind of positioned it as like an introduction to Arabian racing under the umbrella of HARC, and went to several different locations around the country. We started with the Arabian Breeders' World Cup show, which is a significant international show in Las Vegas in the spring. A lot of the world's premier breeders and owners attend that show. Then we did 2 private breeders forums in 2 of the big hot spots in the USA, Santa Ynez Valley and Scottsdale. I'm sorry, one more, in Aubrey, Texas as well. And then we ended the year at the Arabian Horse Association's annual convention in Tulsa, which actually was, believe it or not, our best forum of the year. Got lots of great activity and fruit born from that. And I thought it was really important to have face-to-face time, and it ended up being that it exactly was. The road show format is tiresome and expensive on some level, but it was really important, at least in the United States, to be able to have that face time with these breeders, to make eye contact with them, to communicate the facts and the passion that come behind racing. And we were really pleased with the results. As we transition into next year, I'm planning on doing less traveling and more online broadcasts, like podcasts, live streaming interviews, that sort of a thing. And I think that we're ready for that. But looking back, I'm glad that we did the first year with some face-to-face time. I think that really helped. And one significant thing that it created was the surfacing of a handful of high-profile movers and shakers in the show horse community who stood up and said, "I'm interested," and that I feel like gave permission to a lot of the other people in that group to follow and go ahead as well. So for that reason, I think that was a good call for the first year. So for each forum, we did a lot of social media and a lot of promotion, a lot of e-blasts, a lot of some print ads, and always had an event page on Facebook. This was a card that we handed out at a couple of the horse show forums on the tables in the VIP areas. Here's just a couple of pictures from a couple of the forums, just so you can see a setup. We had a promotional table with some materials, a raffle, some racing publications, and the HARC booth. This was from the Arabian Breeders' World Cup. You'll recognize Pamela Burton. She co-hosted 2 of them with me, so that was great. At each one, we did a raffle at the end just to kind of bring people in and continue their experience. The Arabian Racing Cup graciously sponsored a VIP invitation to the Darley Awards for this year. And we're so happy with the person who got that and is coming. I'll say more about that later. We also offered a VIP day at the races for giving them ownership status for the the biggest stakes race that was near them or that they could arrange to come to. This is a great story. How many have heard of Omel Arab, the breeding program? All right, good handful. So that's a show horse, it's a halter horse breeding program in San Ynez, actually. And they leased out one of their stallions, actually, to Yanao Podlaski a few years ago. His name was Omel Bellissimo. He's a halter stallion. And they were using him for their program to add some additional type. And of course, they run many or all of their show horses, which is fantastic. And the Bellissimos did fantastic at the track, which was not the intent, perhaps nor the expectation. But it is a fantastic example of how many other Bellissimos are out there in the show world that we don't know about, who could do very well on the track. So this is a bottle of their estate-grown wine, so we would raffle off one of those in honor of Omel Bellissimo. And then lastly, we offered a free breeding to a HARC stallion named Favorite, which is a monarch son. So in addition to the forums, we had a bunch of different supplemental marketing materials for our outreach. We did have a booth made. We always showed the HARC video, which is a fantastic video. If you haven't seen that, we created a newcomer's guide. Where did they go here? And I have a bunch of these up here if you'd like to come get some afterwards. But it's centered around HARC, but it's really, it really kind of guides people into an overview of racing. And I thought about this recently, that if any of the member countries are thinking about doing this sort of a roadshow format or would have use for these, I would be happy to send you the digital files so that you can just have them printed and made. We could even revise them by country and get some additional mileage out of them. So I brought some up here if you would like to take any home or take a look at them. We did a handful of e-blasts through different services that introduced people to the concept of Arabian racing, especially as we were leading up to different forums to get people primed and oiled for them. And I always had a co-host for each forum because I am not the expert in this room. I can reach people, but I'm not the expert. So I always thought that was important to have not just an expert, but just to have two people. I felt like that really made a difference to be able to tag team and reach people and cover things that maybe one or the other missed. One of the big things that we focused on was once we got people interested, how do we keep them hooked? And the key way we decided was in partnerships. But we didn't have a very good system or partnerships available, frankly, for that matter. So we put together a group of partnership managers, which we refer to as our partnership pool. And I would just feed them with our prospects from each forum and match them up according to either personality or location or whatnot, and give them a mentor and a place to go. So that was a big deal. Now I'm going to show you a video if this will work on these speakers, just to A, kind of mix it up a little bit, and B, I want to say first that this is not necessarily a HARC video. This is a partnership video, but it works into the concept of bringing new people in and meeting the show horse people where they're at. So that's from the place where this video was produced. It features Jim and Sue Meyer, who Sue is the Arabian Jockey Club vice president, and they bred show horses for over 40 years. And now they're breeding half show horses and half race horses, and it's just a great story. So this is from their very first race, and we show this at every forum. I don't think that the volume is hooked up. We're not hearing the volume. Can we get the volume, or do we want to just skip it? Hey, that's a good idea. Why don't I do that?
Try that.
Let's try that.
Put the mic down.
Goes to that lead. Who's your daddy? Now toward the inside, up on the outside, Kinsey Khan. They race into that turn. The slight advantage. Who's your daddy has the rail. Kinsey Khan up on the far outside. Celebrate Grimsby clearly. Light Lady Rose with the rail in fourth. Friction in fifth now. Let's go back to Dixie Belay. Then comes Guinevere as they move around the bend. As they make their way into the turn, Saying Tiki Bell by 2. Entering Kinsey Kong is racing up on the outside toward the inside. Who's Your Daddy is still right there. Who's Your Daddy's making a nice run in between horses. Those three now across the track. Around the turn they race. Saying Tiki Bell leads it by 3/4 of a length. They've got a quarter mile to go. Who's Your Daddy in between horses? Getting out Kinsey Kong around the turn. They lost some ground. 6 went in 121 flat. Just over Prolong remains. We're squaring off on the inside. Santiqueville. Who's Your Daddy? On the outside, challenging now. Who's Your Daddy? Now to the front by next by half a length. Who's Your Daddy? Trying to edge away from Santiqueville, who's trying to battle back. Kinsey Kong is racing in third. Who's Your Daddy? That's my daddy. And who's Your Daddy in the late double? Santiqueville getting second. Kinsey Kong third, followed by Dixie the lane fourth. And next in line, Superfecta Wagerers is Light Lady Rose.
So the reason that we show that is because they first got involved in a partnership, a very fun and successful partnership, and that's what got them hooked. It's also what made them feel comfortable getting into Arabian racing, and so we're encouraging other people to do the same. So we're almost done. So we're talking about our outreach. Now let's talk about quickly our internal marketing initiatives. We run a monthly ad in Arabian Finish Line magazine, as well as a monthly column in that. I write that every month and stay in front of the current internal audience. We also have ongoing advertising on horsereporter.com, and then we have a dedicated page on the AJC website that has specifically the USA information that we send people to, and that's super important as well. So, okay, so what did we get out of the HARC outreach? We have, I am thrilled to say who we have coming on. It's not much in numbers, but these people are the movers and shakers in the USA show horse business right now. Isaac Taylor, Taylor Ranch, they're 2-generation, 5-decade breeding program in Utah that have produced several historic national champions like Muscat, Ariadne, Aladdin lived and died there. And Isaac is the son who's taking it over, and he is hook, line, and sinker. He has a Russian bred right now that is coming in and hitting the track this year, and he's been incentivized by HARC. So he's coming to the Darleys, so make sure you say hi if you come this year. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Mark Davis, Royal Arabians resulted out of our Las Vegas forum. If you go to any of the big shows, they're the farm's banner you see hanging in the main ring. And they're breeding a couple hundred horses a year. And they are super interested in diversifying their program as well. Tim and Marty Shea, they are longtime breeders of Variant Arabian breeding, a Fire Bay V, if you know that name. Super talented, athletic horses. A lot of them tend to be perhaps too upright, but not all of them are upright. And those are the key possible players. They're super excited. Sandro Pina is an international halter trainer with a huge following. He's coming to the Darleys as well. He came to the Las Vegas Forum. And there's a handful of others as well, but these are the main ones that we're super excited about, who could make a huge difference. The spinning out of the Isaac Taylor interest, the Arabian Horse Times, which has not generally been very involved in Arabian racing, is running a monthly blog on Isaac's experience as he learns about this and gets his feet in the water. So they're following him through a monthly blog that they publish every month going forward. So it's a little bit of a gamble. We hope he does really well. But that's been super exciting and fun to get the Times involved as well. So from that group alone, we have more runners come in 2017, and they were all incentivized by HARC. So that's key. I'm going to digress a little bit. That's pretty much what I have for outreach. I'll take questions at the end. But I also wanted to talk about something exciting that has come up this year that every member country specifically needs to know about. And I have sheets up here that I would like every member country representative to take home. And I'll have a few extra if you'd like some. But when we started doing the e-blast, one of the key e-blast marketing services, Arabian Origins Marketing, loved what they saw. They're not necessarily Arabian people, but they really identified with the mission of HARC, especially with the heritage lines and the commitment to Arabian type. So they really wanted to start supporting HARC and the mission, and started donating e-blasts for us whenever we wanted it, and then came back and said, we'd like to be some form of a media sponsor. So that partnership has been developed, and it's something that every associate member or member country can take advantage of. It's a member benefit for HARC. And we need to be getting the word out so that we can start utilizing this like we should. So this first slide is what they're delivering to us, to HARC. You'll see they have a banner ad on the homepage of the HARC website. We sent out a press release last summer to all of the major Arabian publications around the globe announcing the partnership. They give HARC unlimited free e-blasts for HARC News, and they give 25% discount, which their prices are already very good, for all HARC affiliate members and owners of HARC horses. So they have a great following in both the international and the USA audience. So depending on where you're at, they've got you covered. They have a list of about 35,000 emails. So we are naming them our media partner, and we provide them with complimentary blasts to the HARC list as well, and ongoing promotion of their discount. So if you'd like to come up and get a flyer that outlines all of this with information on who to contact, I'll have those up here as well. So next year, like I said, we're going to move more into podcasts and online version forums, but do not regret the face-to-face time we invested last year. We're going to continue doing e-blasts, inviting one-on-one conversations, and if you want to use any of this, I'm happy to talk with you or provide you with any of these materials or digital files, anything that I can do to help kind of give more mileage to this for your outreach efforts, I'm happy to do. And then don't forget to take advantage of the Arabian Select partnership. That's really a fantastic deal for the member countries and for HARC in general. So that's a wrap. Any questions?
Do you see coming forward this season's racing? Do you think there'll be?
Thank you. That was really interesting, particularly the idea that people from the showing world are inspired to come back Arab racing, because of the Heritage Alliance. We have exactly the same problem in England. A lot of people left because they saw the type of the Arabian going, and they got disheartened by the horses winning by such large margins. So I think there's a lot of action points we can take there from the UK. Do you think with those studs coming back in, do you think you're going to have dedicated HARC only races in America this year, if you've got all those people coming in, or do you just think they'll be racing against the open population?
I think it's going to take them time to get really situated. So, when I went into this, I was gung-ho and thought we'd be getting a super high conversion rate with these forums. After the first couple of forums, I realized that we have a learning curve to overcome first, and once that education happens, that's when we're going to start seeing the large number of conversions. So it's going to take, I would say, 2 to 3 years before we start seeing like serious numbers, but it's getting the train rolling that's the hardest and slowest part, and once it rolls, then I do believe that there's going to be a big impact. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Having experience with the Arabian race horses in the United States, I see a problem with number of racetracks participating, allowing the Arabian racing.